Thomas and I will explain you now the last feature that defines complex adaptive systems, which is emergence. We now saw contextuality, feedback, self-organization, and this is the most complicated, let's say, the most complex of the complex concepts, which is emergence. Self-organized systems, you need to think this way now. Self-organized complex systems represent wholes within the virtually infinite forms of possible behavior of the parts. So we start with a system which is composed by many entities interacting in different ways. Through feedback mechanisms given by the contextual interactions, they self-organize. And then what happens with this whole thing? This is what is... So the question is, what is the self-organizing whole to the parts? The notion of emergence tends to explain or aims at explaining this relation. What is the relation between the self-organizing whole and the parts that formed it in the first place? So, the definition says emergence occurs when an entity is observed to have properties its parts do not have on their own, properties or behavior which emerge only when the parts interact in a wider whole. So again, this is the typical example. We see a lot of this in nature, in insects and so on, and this is not explainable in terms of traditional scientific thinking, because these are new concepts. It's very interesting. The ants, for example, these are mainly two-dimensional entities. They can only move through surfaces. They cannot jump. They cannot, if you put, as is in this case, you put distance which is not walkable, no ant can make it. But they as a whole form themselves a bridge that all the ants can walk. Even each ant can walk because they are and become part of the bridge while moving. So they can become a moving bridge, and all the ants can transit from one place to another by following this principle. So this behavior, which no ant can have, the whole collection of ants can have. And this is emergent behavior then. So I will mention a few examples of emergence, not only in the physical or in the insect realm, as I mentioned before. So if we have words as entities, and we make them interact through communications and intentions, we have the emergence of a language. So the language is more than just the words that contain them. It's all the possible combinations, communicating things and making clear or not clear intentions. Thoughts, for example. You can have a particular experience process in your mind, but if you have interactions of storage, process and retrieval of thoughts, you could have an emergent consciousness. Not all, it's allegedly or supposedly not all entities in this world that can have thoughts can have consciousness. We think, for example, of a dog, for example, or an ant that can think, can make a decision. So can sense the world and then say, I'm going to do this. But it doesn't have the capacity to store enough thoughts or to process these thoughts or to retrieve these thoughts whenever it's needed. So we cannot talk that it's conscious. It's only able to think, but not necessarily conscious. Same with words. We can have a collection of words, but not necessarily long enough to be able to communicate intentions. So we don't have a language. It's mainly, for example, a collection of acronyms to describe a group of institutions. That's not a language, it's just a collection of words that is useful for a certain purpose. Now, same with ecological species are the entities, then we have the ecological interactions, but that doesn't really make the ecosystem. The ecosystem is the whole thing that emerges from all the possible interactions through all the species. Same with people, goods, money, transactions and production, and we have an economy. The economy is not the people, it's not the goods, it's not the money, it's not the particular interactions, but the whole thing that emerges out of that. So it's very interesting that we need to understand that emergence, the notion of emergence, when taken seriously, induces naturally a hierarchical structure. I will help you to think about it. If we start from the idea that entities interact, creating larger wholes, then these larger wholes eventually also might be able to interact with other larger wholes, forming even larger wholes. So that's what comes with the idea of hierarchical structure and can be explained very simple in the human body, indeed, in any biological organism. We have the cells that all together form tissues which do not have the properties of a cell, and the tissues all together have the capacity of organs, which is not the capacity of a tissue and neither the capacity of a cell. Several organs together form a system, like the vascular system, for example, which in turn is part of a human organism. Several different systems form the organism. The system is in turn made by several organs, the organs are made in turn by several tissues, and the tissues are made in turn by several cells. So we have 5 hierarchical levels just to describe us as an organism.